What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor season 42, this time episode 4. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and I feel like this episode was kind of annoying because I feel like to me it kind of showed the bigger problems in the editing this season. I feel like every season I complain about editing, but like last episode we didn't see anything from the Blue Tribe, and I feel like this episode we didn't see anything from the Green Tribe. So I feel like the editing on Survivor is like still not living up to standards.
Yeah, I thought this was like the slowest episode thus far. Maybe slowest isn't the right word, but maybe like most forgettable episode of the season thus far, especially coming off of last week. It was like go, go, go last week. And then this week, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to watch this episode again in order to take notes to podcast about it, you know?
Yeah, I feel like part of that was like the conflict felt very manufactured because like the main conflict in the episode was whether they were going to vote out Swati or Tori. And I feel like everyone had their mind made up earlier in the episode than we saw them have their mind made up because I feel like they always act like they don't make up their minds until like the minute that tribal starts. But like from what Drea said, it was pretty obvious, I think, that she had already decided that she was going to trust Tori and vote out Swati. So I guess it just like, to me, it felt like they had to manufacture a conflict out of something that like wasn't actually that big of a conflict. We as the viewers didn't really have any tension because they made it pretty clear who was like telling the truth and who wasn't. And so it was kind of like a mystery game, but they already told us who the killer was the minute the episode started.
Oh my gosh. And so like Alyssa and I were talking pre-starting the podcast, but I was saying how low-key they spoiled this episode because of the potato beware advantage. We haven't seen this beware advantage found yet. This is supposedly the Blue Tribe's beware advantage, but in episode 1, it showed Tori supposedly reading the beware advantage potato phrase, and before this, episode 1, we were thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't Tori's voice, and maybe they were doing some tricky editing, and they just put Tori's face as like, oh, confused, reading the beware advantage. But then like listening to it back now, like it is probably most likely Tori's voice reading that beware advantage. So it sort of ruins the tension in this episode and in the premiere episode with Tori versus Zach. And here it's Tori versus Swati. When you have that thing in the back of your mind, like, oh, Tori is maybe probably safe because she hasn't found this advantage yet. We haven't seen it on the TV. So it's sort of like, Survivor editors in the preview for episode 1. Why didn't you show Mike finding the beware advantage? Because he would be finding it sooner. We're going into episode 5 and we haven't seen this beware advantage where one person is safe, and this person has been the backup vote for 2 votes now.
And another thing, I think we talked about this definitely last season, but I feel like I mentioned this before. But Survivor editors have this thing that they do where as soon as someone says like, oh, so and so is definitely going home tonight, like you know that they're safe. And so Roxroy, when he announced that it was definitely going to be Tori, you're like, okay, guess Tori isn't going home tonight. So like it's fine if Survivor editors want to keep doing this thing where someone declares who is going home, but like occasionally maybe have that person not be the person or be the person who actually goes home so that like people like us who watch a lot of Survivor and know like Survivor editing tricks can like be surprised every once in a while when it actually is the person that they say it's going to be. Like, come on.
Yeah, like I'm sure the casual viewers of Survivor, they don't know about that potato phrase. They probably don't even remember the potato phrase being said in episode 1. But I'm sure anyone listening to us talk about Survivor, anyone listening to Survivor podcasts on Twitter, Reddit, stuff like that, like those people would probably remember this potato phrase, and it just sort of sucks that it's ruining the tension from multiple episodes when they could have just had shown like Mike reading his phrase rather than showing Tori potentially reading a phrase that isn't even brought up until episode 5, maybe next week, maybe episode 6, who knows. But like going off of what you were just saying, Alyssa, I think for the preview next week, it shows Green Tribe saying Daniel is for sure going home. We're voting Daniel out. And so, from what you were just saying, I sort of feel like Daniel isn't going home next week because the preview wouldn't spoil it so much. Like showing Green saying Daniel's going home. Like, oh no, Daniel's probably safe next week then.
I would be willing to bet my left foot that Daniel is safe next week.
Are you going to bet fingers like Swati?
Sure. You can have all of them because I'm pretty confident with the Survivor editing style that is what's going to happen. That like Daniel's going to be the fake out, or they're not even going to go to tribal. Because I feel like another like trick that they have is they have like a tribe discuss in depth what they're going to do if they go to tribal, and then they don't go to tribal. And so it's kind of like, why did we just spend time on this?
Which I like spending time on that, so at least we like get to see some background information from the tribes rather than like entirely skipping over some camp light for a team. So I do like seeing those segments where, oh, we get to see the layout of the land for one team that isn't going to tribal, but we know maybe they go to tribal next week or in the future, but we get to see some of the dynamics rather than like, oh, big question mark, no idea who these people are, no idea who's friends with who's aligned with who dislikes who, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which I guess is why I'm kind of like frustrated that we like totally last week we totally got nothing of Blue, which makes it kind of disorienting to know like what is going on with them this week when they do go to tribal. So it's just, and even if you're not going to show like their detailed discussion about like, oh, who's going home if we do end up going to tribal, like show something, you know?
Yeah, so confessionals this week. The people with the most confessionals, they tied with 3 confessionals each. Hi, Marianne, Drea, Romeo, and Swati. Drea, Romeo, Swati makes sense. They are the team that goes to tribal. Hi makes sense because of the fallout from last week. Marianne, she's just always getting confessionals because she's so bubbly and quirky and lively. So that makes sense as well for me with these 3 topmost confessional getters.
I feel like it also makes sense because they kind of wanted to show us a bit of that tension growing on Orange between Jonathan and everyone else. And I feel like Marianne, because she is like a pretty good confessional giver, is a pretty like easy way to share some insight into the Orange tribe, just because she has no problems with saying exactly what she means. So yeah.
Exactly. And then the least confessional getters this episode was 0. Only one person, and that was Lydia. She was the only person this episode to get 0 confessionals, and now she is the lowest confessional getter for the season thus far. She has only 4 confessionals in the entire game thus far. She's the lowest number of confessionals for people left in the game with 4. Roxroy is the next lowest with 5 confessionals. And even the people that were voted out already, Jenny, Mariah, and Zach, all had 6 confessionals, and they were voted out like episodes 1, 2, 3. So I don't know. It's like, what is up with Lydia to get 0 this episode and to only have 4 total, lower than people that were voted out episode 1.
And this was something that Rachel and I were also talking about before we started, but like it's especially weird because Lydia was kind of central to the conflict that was started last week. And so you would think that like we had some stuff at the beginning of the episode where like Daniel was like, I'm not really ready to talk about this, and Chanel was like trying to clear her name or whatever. And it's like we didn't hear from Lydia, even though I imagine she felt some kind of way about being the person that people voted for, and like she didn't go home, but she very nearly did. And so I feel like I wish that we had heard from her because like she does have a part in the story that is happening. So it just
I
just
agree.
feels like we're missing something.
it's so weird that we didn't see any from Lydia this episode, especially because of what happened last week. Not even one thing of her reaction, her saying, I was so nervous, like, thank you all so much for saving me. Hi, like, I love you so much. Nothing. She could have been like, I was so freaking nervous, y'all. Like, this was sucks. I'm indebted to you. But literally, she's just like standing in the background. And like from her social media stuff, like she seems very funny, quirky, like can talk and maybe give good confessionals. So it's just like weird that we didn't see any of what she was feeling, especially how big of a blow up it was last week. I'm like, I would have wanted to hear her thoughts. Like, was she nervous? What was she thinking? Is she mad at people on the team? Like, what is going through her mind?
It's especially weird just because, like, there doesn't seem to be a reason to have purpled her. Like, I feel like sometimes when people get purpled, we like to, like, look for a reason. Like, oh, Purple Kelly got purpled because she quit, and so Jeff was punishing her. But it's like, I feel like Heather last season, we never really got like the reason that she was purpled. And like there's a bunch of fan theories about like why she ended up being purpled. And I feel like some of those are like kind of I don't like some of the speculative theories about the reason that Heather was purpled because a lot of them paint her as like not a very nice person. So I guess it's just one of those things where like don't purple a person, and if you're going to purple a person, I feel like there should be a reason for it, because like a lot of times people are like, oh, the purple person just didn't contribute to the story, but it's like the story was at least a part about Lydia this last episode and we still didn't hear from her.
Yeah, like we've talked about with Heather last season, it's gotta suck, you know. You're on Survivor, you're maybe like doing watch parties with your friends and family, and then to like be totally disappeared from the episodes. It's like, how do you share that with your friends and family if you aren't being shown, kind of thing? And the fan theory, people online on Reddit, I've been seeing people are thinking that Lydia is going to maybe go home because of the hourglass twist this season. And people last season were angry that Sydney went home in that spot. And so now people are saying, oh, Jeff and the production editing are like retroactively like trying to make people not like Lydia on the season by purpling her so they won't be mad when she goes home because of an hourglass twist or a twist like that.
The thing is, people said the same thing about Heather last season. So I feel like that's
she
like
went home in fire.
yeah, I do not like it. We are not fans.
Yeah, especially if Lydia does go far, it's sort of, you know, is Lydia going to win the season because she's not being shown? I guess anything is possible, you know? She could totally still win, but it's sort of also like ruining the tension with by showing us the potato phrase, not editing someone into the show sort of ruins the tension of, oh, you know, us being invested in Lydia, us wanting to see Lydia do well or go far, or if it's like a blindside and then, oh, Lydia goes home. If we never see her, people won't care that she's blindsided or sent home.
Or we'll know that she's about to come home or go home because we'll actually get to hear from her. And so
Yeah,
it's like
her
the
vote out
episode where,
episode.
yeah, the episode where Lydia gets more than a couple confessionals, we can pretty much kiss her goodbye. So
Yeah, alas. So, speaking of Lydia and the green team, at the start of this episode, we see some of the green team's fallout from last episode. I really wish we saw more from this tribe this episode rather than just, oh, one segment at the beginning and then we don't really see much from them for the rest of the episode. Like, I would have wanted to know, okay, after 2 days, after they've maybe settled some of this, are people still mad at each other? Like, where are the bonds? Are people like icing each other out, or are they like becoming friendly again? You know, we just saw the fallout from that night, but we didn't really see, okay, 2 days later, if when they won immunity, are they still pissed off at each other or not?
I feel like we didn't even really see the full fallout from the
True.
night of, because it was kind of like Daniel saying he didn't want to talk about it, Chanel saying a couple things, and that was kind of it. And I guess the alliance between Hi, Mike, and Lydia also happened.
You don't even remember. Yeah, now.
Yeah, I kept wanting to say Jenny, but it's like, no, Jenny went home. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Daniel says he doesn't want to talk about it at that night that we see them come back from tribal, which I get, you're blindsided, it's really hard, it's stressful night, you're tired and burnt out, like you just want to go to sleep and leave it alone, like I'll deal with it in the morning. Totally understandable. Like you are burnt out from that night. But in this game, I feel like this is low key a bad move because other people are going to talk. They might clear the air while you're saying, hey, let's talk tomorrow. People might resent you for things. They're going to go to sleep angry. They're going to maybe make up things in their head when they're thinking about it all night because you didn't clear the air before going to bed. I feel like it's very similar, like they say in relationships, you never want to go to bed angry. So I feel like Daniel letting this wait till morning, it might fester and cause negative things for his relationships.
The thing is, I feel like it could be just as negative, like if he's not prepared to have a conversation and he ends up flubbing it. Just because, like, I feel like Daniel sometimes has a problem where, like, he is kind of scatterbrained and, like, he has that reputation for being, like, kind of manic, kind of, like, difficult to, like, pin down. And I feel like if he had come back from that tribal showing that same kind of, like, manic energy, it wouldn't have been good for him. And so I feel like in some ways it might have been a positive for him to be like, hey, I need to step back and chill out because, like, that is not very, like, typical of someone who is, like, as, like, in your face and neurotic as Daniel is. So maybe this could be to people who are looking to work with him, like, a sign of growth because he's willing to, like, sit and let things, like, sit, which, like, might be too generous of a read, probably is too generous of a read, but I feel like it's not necessarily a bad thing to let things sit if the emotions are too high to have a productive conversation.
That's true. That's definitely understandable. I think like the best thing would be to be calm and then have your argument made that night so you can talk about things calmly. But I agree. If people are just going to be yelling at one another, then it makes more sense to be like, hey, let's take a chill pill. We can wait until the morning kind of thing. And, with editing, maybe they were all fighting still back at camp. And then Daniel said, yeah, let's talk about this tomorrow kind of thing. So I don't know. I just wish we saw more because it's like, did Daniel talk it out in the morning? What were people's responses the morning after? Or was it also a flubbed conversation the next day if people weren't willing or weren't receptive to hear Daniel's side of things?
Yeah, so I guess it's just maybe we'll see that get picked up next week when we get back to the Green Tribe. But I don't know.
Yeah.
The editing this episode, I feel like they definitely kind of left Green in the dust.
We see Mike and High bond on Green at that nighttime scene, which was interesting because Mike still doesn't have a vote. He might not have a vote next week. We see this week he still doesn't have a vote. All the phrases aren't said. So if it's High, Lydia, Mike, that's still 2 votes. And then you would choose between Chanel and Daniel who to vote out. And then those 2 would vote for one another to make it like a 3-1 kind of vote and not a 2-2 vote. So that's interesting. High and Mike, we also see hugging at the immunity challenge, saying like, I love you so much, like multiple times. So I do wonder if there is something more here between High and Mike, and they've like made a big friendship after the Daniel blow up and fallout because, we haven't really seen them talk before this, and then they're hugging and telling each other how much they love each other at the challenge later on.
Yeah, like maybe there's something that they did beyond just building that alliance. And again, maybe that's something that we'll see when we return to Green and their alliance becomes more relevant. Because I feel like one thing that they've been doing, like not a lot, but they did this episode was like flashback scenes. Like we got to see Swati telling multiple people like, "Oh, you're my number one," and so like maybe we'll get a Mike and High flashback friendship scene. So
Maybe. We also see Mike mad at Daniel. uh, which, makes sense. Mike was blindsided this episode. That's why I want to see more. Like, are Mike and Daniel still on bad terms or are they not? Because for Mike, I can see why he would be mad at Daniel. But I feel like in Survivor and these kinds of games where you need numbers, you can't really shut someone out completely and say, Daniel, I'm never, ever, ever going to work with you again, because you never know what's going to happen. There could be a tribe swap next week and you and Daniel are switched into the same tribe and you need each other for the votes. So I want to know, like, is Mike still mad at Daniel, or has he completely written Daniel off and he's never willing to work with him again? I feel like you need to forgive someone, but you don't forget what they did. So you pretend nice with Daniel, but you're not going to completely shun him out and like isolate him because he did this thing last week.
Yeah, you're not going to tell him like your innermost thoughts and secrets, but like if there's a plan that he needs to be in on, you can still tell him the plan type thing.
Which I don't know. I'm not sure if Mike is that kind of player that would be willing to forgive and forget. He sort of seems like the kind that would be like, I hate Daniel. We're voting him out next time. I'm never going to work with him again. So I wish we saw more. Are they still mad at each other or not?
Yeah. And like maybe Hai is the person who encourages Mike to forgive Daniel. Maybe that's like a part of why their alliance works. We don't know because we didn't actually get to see that much of it.
Yeah, so Chanel on this team, not really getting much of the blowback. I feel like Chanel has a lot of plausible deniability because she didn't vote last episode. So, like she was saying on the episode, hey, I didn't vote. Like, you can't blame things on me. I didn't even vote. What are you saying? So, I feel like that's a good spot for her because she has that plausible deniability. Like, Daniel, I didn't force you to do anything. I didn't even vote.
I do think it was interesting what Daniel said about the fact that like Chanel, who like I feel like the editing was pretty clear last week, was the one who made this happen. Didn't get any of the fallout. So it'll be interesting to see if that social game that she bragged about last week actually like it does exist.
Which feels bad for Daniel if he is being like isolated or shunned on this team because he was put in such a tricky spot. Like, you know, you're thinking on your feet, you're not eating, you're not sleeping. How would any random other person react in that situation? It's hard to say. And it's like, I don't know. It's just such a tricky spot for him to be in that situation that I really hope he's not being mean to on the island, you know?
Yeah, like it's a game and it should be treated like a game.
Yeah, but everyone knows Green. Everyone on Green knows that Mike has the idol now, so everyone knows everyone's advantages, basically.
Including on Blue, which is a whole mess. Because I feel like we last week when we saw Blue in like the preview, we were like, oh, Roxroy looks like he's gonna go home because he's annoying everybody. And it seems like he's especially annoying Romeo. Was like Roxroy just keeps telling me to do all these things, and there's like a whole montage of Roxroy bossing Romeo around. And then Romeo's like, but I gotta deal with it because like I need him as a number, blah 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 blah. So Roxroy's name never actually comes up in Blue as like a possibility, which is amazing, I guess, considering that he seems to be by far the hardest person to work with.
It's the fake out. Roxroy was being annoying in the preview, so he's not going home. Daniel is being said is going home next week, is not going home. I thought it was interesting here in this segment where Romeo in confessionals was saying, like, yeah, Roxroy is being bossy, and then it goes to that montage of Roxroy telling people what to do, which is very meta, I feel like. I feel like we've seen this come up more and more recently where players on these different kinds of reality TV shows will reference the edit or reference like little jingles on the show that they're going to edit in. And then they edit the show and then they do the little jingle or they do the music behind. So it's like Romeo here mentions, yeah, you know, Roxroyd says all this stuff, cue montage, and then it goes to the montage. In The Amazing Race this last season, the Holderness family, Kim was saying, oh, insert goofy music here. They're going to show I couldn't find this thing, but it's right under my nose. Cue like spotlight on the thing, and then they edited it like that. So it's like these super fans who know the show and they know like, oh, how it looks on TV. I feel like it's so interesting to see them mention that in a confessional or in an episode, and then they edit it that way because they know what the show looks like on TV. I think it was interesting Romeo mentioned that.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting because it shows like this heightened level of awareness, but I feel like right now it seems more like them referencing Survivor rather than them like controlling the narrative, I guess. Like it would be really interesting to see someone like kind of control the narrative more rather than just reference stuff that is already typical. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
How would you control the narrative? What do you mean
I
by
don't
that?
even know, but I would know it when I saw it. So, yes.
Interesting. Okay, okay.
I
And
guess if
so
they like were like saying like, "Oh, and they're gonna edit me to look like a bad person because I said this, this, and this," and like if they talk specifically details about like how they were gonna be edited or how they're gonna be portrayed and stuff like that.
hmm, I wonder, I feel like they would never actually show that on TV. So maybe people are saying it, but they're not going to show it.
Maybe we
Maybe,
don't know.
maybe. We'll never know. But we go into the reward challenge. They have to unbraid some rope, shoot some balls into the hoop, and then it is a teamwork challenge, and they win 10 decently sized fish. And I laughed because last season they won that one big blue fish that we saw, and then this time they got 10 colorful fish.
I think it's so interesting because I like to myself said the first time I saw this, decently sized fish probably means they're gonna be like this big, and then they come back into camp and it's like the fish is as long as his arm. Like what the hell?
Oh my gosh. We learned this episode that Jonathan is good at another thing, which is leadership. He tells his team that over under stuff, and I'm like, dang, that's so good. That is great teamwork. You know, having one voice as the leader telling the others how to unbraid makes it so much quicker. And I felt like that helped Jonathan's team gets so far ahead in the unbraiding portion of this challenge because he's just like over, under, and everyone else listened rather than having too many cooks in the kitchen and people fighting over like, you go under, you go over, like, oh, where do I go now? Just having that one voice, I felt like helped this team succeed in this challenge.
Especially because it's easier once you can build a rhythm. Just because braiding, it's the same thing, just
Mm.
repeated over and over. And so I feel like some of the teams, the reason that they were going so slow is because they acted like it was a puzzle, and it's like, no, it's just a braid. So
Yeah, you get into the rhythm and it's the same thing over and over again. I feel like this challenge really highlighted how well Orange works together because even though we saw people saying, oh, Jonathan did this whole challenge for the Orange team, like, not really, because this is such a team challenge. Everyone had to shoot a basket at the end. It wasn't like Jonathan could shoot all 4 baskets and win for the entire team. Everyone had to do the braid portion. It wasn't like Jonathan did the braid portion himself like the swimming portion last week or the shooting the sandbags last week. So it's like Orange really can work together. It wasn't Jonathan doing this entire challenge for them versus last week, the immunity. Jonathan basically did that for his team.
yeah, and I wonder if part of the reason why they like talked about like, oh, Jonathan carried his team was because they want to like make him out to be a threat, or like they want to downplay how well Orange works together. And I thought it would have been really interesting if Jonathan had like really played that up and been like, "Oh yeah, I totally have to carry my team," rather than being like, "Oh yeah, Orange team is one real big happy family." Because I feel like that would have worked better as a strategy post merge. Because it's like, yeah, you have the target on your back, but like at least you have a solid four who you know will be voting together rather than like talking about the four as like a big family and inviting people to kind of like pry in the cracks of that.
That's true. It feels like that's not Jonathan's like personality. He seems so humble and like aware of his perception, how people perceive him, you know? Like Tori says, oh, Jonathan's a Goliath. Hai says in a confessional that Jonathan is Thor. We see Jonathan saying that he doesn't really like people calling him that kind of thing. And he realizes that he is the shield for his team and for other people, but he's also providing for his camp. Like, I think the appeal of Jonathan is that he is humble, even though he is big and strong. Like we saw his friendship and relationship with Omer. Jonathan realizes, hey, Omer's my brain shield. I'm lacking in certain departments. Omer can help me, rather than I feel like other alpha male archetypes we've seen that are so like, I'm the best, I can do everything, puzzles, swimming, challenges, I'm good at everything. Whereas Jonathan seems more humble and he knows like what he's good at and what he's not good at.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing where like everyone called like Joe Englund like Joey Amazing because like, oh, he's so amazing. And I feel like Jonathan has just as much physical prowess as Joe Englund did, but like he would never call himself Johnny Amazing. He seems like the kind of guy who would be extremely uncomfortable if anyone like tried to like call him that. So I feel like it is one of those things where like his humility is kind of his saving grace because his tribe doesn't see him as a threat because they know that he's a team player, they know that he's a provider, and they know that like he is a physical threat, but his worth to the team is more than just that.
I really hope Jonathan can make it to the merge. I really want to see Jonathan and individual immunity challenges. Like we talked about last week, send Jonathan to The Challenge, the TV show. Let Jonathan have his own show where he does stuff. Like, if Jonathan can beat the 5 record immunity wins, I want to see that happen. Like, I want to see, can he do balance? Can he do other things? Seemingly, maybe so. I feel like since he's a beach shop owner, he's probably near the ocean, and we've seen he's good at swimming. Maybe he surfs. That could be good for balance for those balancing challenges. Like, I want to see, can Jonathan beat the record here? I hope he's not voted out pre-merge. I want to see him in individual challenges.
Yeah, I feel like Jonathan is definitely the kind of player who would be invited back just because like even if he does nothing else before he gets voted out, like he's made a pretty big impression with just in these past 2 episodes, with the past 2 immunity challenges, he's done a lot.
I agree. So we see also this episode, he gets a home segment talking about his dad, making him and his brother do like workouts as a young kid. Get Jonathan's older brother on a show if he's that physical too. Maybe they can both go on the challenge or something. But yeah, that segment was interesting.
Yeah, I like that. I did wonder, like, it seemed kind of like he didn't have a great relationship with his dad because of that, but I wasn't sure if, like, I was reading those vibes correctly. But just,
Yeah,
like,
that's why I was like, oh, it's interesting because I like, was it a positive segment or was it a negative segment kind of thing? Because it's sort of like, I don't know, low-key feels, oh, does he resent his parents because of the working out and like waking up and doing those things? Or does he not? It was weird vibes.
yeah, and I wonder if that's, like, going to come up again. Like, maybe that'll be part of Jonathan's arc. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of Jonathan knowing how to do things, Lindsay says, oh, is this kind of fish? And then Jonathan is like, no, it's this kind of fish. So Jonathan can name fish also. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. He's crazy.
I guess we'll go right into the immunity challenge. Back-to-back challenges here. The immunity challenge, Marianne says the phrase again. Crickets. Nothing happens. Which,
okay, here's the thing. She totally changed, like, what the meaning of the phrase was. Because the first time she was like, oh, the whole thing about, like, the bunny in the mailbox is that only the bunny knows what's happening. And now it's like the bunny is in the mailbox to get warm. Like, come on. If you're going to make up a phrase, like, at least keep it consistent, Marianne.
the sentiment was there. I thought it was interesting how the Blue Tribe last season, Luvu, they didn't find their Beware advantage until like right before the merge. So they were the last group to find it. This season also, Blue is the last group to find it.
Yeah. I just, like, I do wonder whether or not, like, someone has already found it and it just hasn't been said. But then also, if someone had found it, then someone wouldn't have had a vote for this week. So I guess that doesn't make sense. Never mind.
So I'm like, yeah, for Blue, is it just hidden really difficult, or did they purposefully like not stick it out there yet? Because it seems odd that, Mike maybe found it, day 6, but it's going on day 9. and the blue team hasn't found it. I'm like, what is going on? Same as Marianne's reaction. Are they just twiddling their thumbs over there? Like 2 times now, the blue team just hasn't found it. Maybe their camp is like has a lot more holes to dig in and look in trees and stuff. But I'm like, dang, what is going on here?
I mean, maybe the reason we didn't see anything of blue last week was because they were all out looking for the idol, but nobody found it.
So this challenge, it's another swimming challenge. 2 people are swimming, they're pulling the boat, and then 2 people have to jump and get the keys, and then it's a fish puzzle to end it out. Speaking of Jonathan, he's so strong in the swimming here again. He's literally pulling the boat, and then Marianne, I was scared for her. I thought she'd get hit by the boat or like get pulled under the boat or something. She was literally like being pulled by Jonathan and the boat, which the boat plus 2 people is gotta be already over 200 pounds.
He can do like a billion pull-ups with 100 pounds on his back, though, so apparently 200 pounds isn't that different.
Yeah, he swam in college, so that swimming is coming in handy here, helping his team with the swimming portion. And like I grew up swimming competitively, and we would do these like swimming drills where you would like have a parachute kind of thing attached to you, or you'd swim connected to like a weight bucket, and then you'd have to swim and like the counterweights you. And like even that, it's so much drag, it's so difficult. So to single-handedly be pulling 200 pounds behind you when you're not eating and not sleeping, I'm like, dang, kudos to Jonathan, because that is so difficult.
I mean, they had just eaten 10 decently sized fish, so.
Yes, all the power that they need.
I do wonder about those fish. Like, did they eat them all? Because I feel like they would go bad if you didn't eat them pretty immediately. But, like, 10 fish for 4 people is a lot.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about that last season with the one fish that the team won. Like, after a while, it gets sort of grody, you know? The flies could be on it, bugs could be in there. Like, you could get sick from eating rotten fish.
I guess, like, I get it because if you were a tribe of 6, 10 fish for 6 people is way different. But I don't know. I was just thinking about that because 2.5 fish, I feel like, is more than one meal.
Breakfast and dinner. So with the jumping portion, we see Lydia not able to make the jumps. I guess she looks short, so I'm not sure how tall she is, but it's definitely harder for smaller people to jump and get the keys. Reminds me of season 40 when Adam continuously was jumping and climbing up there to get the keys. And so it's like, if you're not tall, I could see you being disadvantaged at this part of the challenge.
I feel like they should do it the way that they do it, like for the individual challenges, where they like do it proportional to your height. So like just make it like you have to jump a distance equal to your height and make those poles adjustable so that it's not as hard for the short people. Or like consider that as a part of your strategy when you're deciding who to put up for jumping. Be like, just make the tall people jump.
Yeah, I'm like, it makes sense you'd stick Lydia there because Lydia probably isn't pulling the boat while swimming, you know, like Mike and Hai were those people, and Daniel's sitting out because of his arm. So it makes sense that she'd be like pigeonholed into the jumping portion, even though she might not be able to do it since she is smaller. But I'm like, I don't know. I was surprised that they let someone else can go and get it. So Chanel did it twice and got both keys. I'm like, if they were stuck there and only Lydia could get one key and only Chanel could get the other key, I'm like, dang, it would be another balance beam situation if they each had to get a key rather than one person getting both.
Yeah. And that definitely would have changed the outcome of the game. So
Then we would have seen more of Green, but Daniel is getting a lot of content from the bench. Like last week, a few weeks ago, we saw him saying rocks where I protect the balls. This week, he says puzzle is the great equalizer from the bench. So he's getting a lot of bench talk, which I thought was fascinating.
I think it's interesting because he said puzzle is the great equalizer, and then it turned out to be true. So, like, is that supposed to make Daniel look good? I don't know.
Prophet. He's predicting the future. I do wonder for Daniel, since he seems to be sitting out a lot for the green team, it's either Daniel sitting out or Lydia sitting out of these challenges. Will sitting out of a lot of challenges cause you to bond less with the team? Because for these like team challenges, at the end, especially when these challenges are so close, you see, like we just said, Hai and Mike hugging, saying they love each other. After Chanel and Lydia complete the puzzle, all four of them are hugging, jumping up and down. You know, that is such a bonding thing in this kind of game. I do wonder if you're sitting out a lot, you're not in that emotional hug at the end. You had no cause in them winning the challenge. Do you miss out because you aren't part of that initial emotional response? Like, hey, they did the puzzle. Thank you so much. Like, I love you all, like that kind of thing, because they're sitting out.
I think if you're Daniel, though, like you don't want to risk putting yourself in a position where people would have an easy reason to vote you off. So I guess it depends on like your like what you think of your own abilities. Like, are you confident that you could contribute to the challenge? Or would you be one of the people who ends up frustrating everyone else and that being in the challenge actually makes your relationship worse?
Yeah, double-edged sword, I guess.
Mhm.
Speaking of, we get to the puzzle. Orange is first. We see Omer and Mary Ann on the puzzle. We've seen them win on puzzle challenges before, so I think that's something to note. Those two work together well, and they're both good at puzzles, seemingly. Green team is second, very, very close. They caught up from far behind. Lydia and Chanel were on that puzzle. And then last was Drea and Swati for blue. I noted this was the second time Swati was on the puzzle and lost for these puzzle challenges, which reminded me of the premiere when Swati and Zach were on the puzzle and then Zach got voted out.
Yeah, I guess Swati's time came. She isn't as good at puzzles as she thought she is, so.
Yeah, don't want to be on the puzzle if you keep losing it for your team. But blue team loses for pre-tribal stuff. We see Tori telling Roxroy about Drea's advantage. Roxroy really, really wants Tori out. And then we see Tori sort of flip it onto Swati and tell Romeo, like, no, Swati told me this, blaming everything on Swati. And then Romeo runs with that information and then orchestrates the flip vote to vote Swati out over Tori.
Yeah, and I feel like part of it is like Romeo and Drea had that conversation where they found the other ways that like Swati had been duplicitous, I guess. So I guess it's one of those things where I think if Romeo and Drea hadn't had another reason to like vote Swati out, like maybe she would have been safe. But it's one of those things where like her sweet talking everyone kind of came back and bit her in the butt.
Yeah, we see that segment where Swati's telling multiple people, hey, you're my number one, you're my number one. Which in one of the exit interviews with Swati, she was saying it was some editing magic where for the Drea, hey, you're my number one, Drea actually said first, Swati, you're my number one. So obviously, you know, Swati has to say it back because it's like if someone says, hey, in a relationship, I love you, and you don't say it back, that's a little bit awkward. So Swati had to say it back. But I do wonder, like, how do you not get caught when you're saying this kind of thing to everyone?
I mean, I think the clear answer is just don't say it to everyone. Like, the easiest lie to hide is the one you never tell type thing. So,
So
yeah.
what if they say it to you? Like Drea says, hey, you're my number one.
You
Do you
say
just not respond?
you say, "Thank you. I'm glad that you trust me that much," or like something like that. Like something that it doesn't make it obvious that you don't see them as your number one, but something that still like builds the relationship.
So sort of changing the subject a little bit. So they're like, oh, in a relationship, I love you. And then you say, I enjoy spending time with you too. It's so bad.
I feel like it's different from saying I love you, but
A little bit, I guess. You know, you want someone to like you enough to be your number one, your final two, final three, go to the end with them. I don't know. I feel like it's a little it's in the same vein where you want someone to say it back to you. Otherwise, it's like you'd be a little like, iffy with that person. Like, why didn't you say it back to me?
well, ideally you wouldn't ever like they would never be questioning why you didn't say it back because you'd have like spun it well enough that they didn't even realize that you didn't say it back. But I
Mm.
feel like the thing with them showing us these conversations between like Drea and Romeo and Swati is that, like I said, they kind of showed Swati was being like kind of manipulative and duplicitous. Like it's not like we just have everyone's word to go off of. Like, I think it would have been interesting if they hadn't shown us the conversation between Romeo and Drea. And it kind of was like a she said situation between Tori and Swati. Because I feel like that would have built more tension about which one of them was going home. Because I feel like they didn't really give us, like, Drea said the whole thing about, like, oh, it seems like there's more than one version of the truth, but it seemed pretty obvious which version of the truth she believes. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Like, I feel like so many people are probably saying, hey, you're my number one out there, or like, hey, let's make a final 3 deal or final 5 deal kind of thing. It sort of feels like this was like, I feel like you were saying this at the beginning of the podcast, like a made up kind of reason to vote Swati out, similar to Zach being voted out because he messed up the puzzle in episode 1. We were talking about, like, Zach didn't really mess up the puzzle. They were already so far behind. It seems like Swati was the person to go here, but it's not just because she said, hey, you're my number one to everyone, because it seems like a lot of people probably say that to everyone, or multiple people on their team, but she got called out for it because there's so few people on this tribe.
Yeah, I feel like the underlying thing wasn't like she was saying, hey, you're my number one to everyone. It was that everyone believed her. And so it showed that she like had a really powerful social game, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, and it also seems like Drea and Romeo were a little bit shocked that, oh, I thought Swati was just this 19, 20-year-old, such a sweet kid out here for the experience. And when they realized after comparing notes, oh my gosh, she's trying to play us all, that they were like a little bit offended, like, oh, we got to get her out now. She's actually playing the game. It really reminded me of like the older woman mom archetypes on Survivor, how if they blindside or backstab, it's frowned upon. Similar here, like if you're a young person and you like one up one of these other people, they're like, I thought you were just a young kid not playing the game, but you got one over on me. We don't like that. Let's vote you out.
Yeah.
But Tori, I thought she was ruthless. She is just voting out her supposedly number ones every time. She voted out Zach. Now she flips and votes out Swati here. But I feel like you got to respect the scrappiness of Tori. Like, she does what she's got to do, and she throws these other people under the bus to make it further. And I feel like low key, Tori could make it to the merge. I feel like Roxbury might be voted out next from this tribe because he was left out of the vote.
Yeah, I feel like the thing with Tori is like she didn't turn on Swati just because like she wanted to turn on Swati. Like she turned on Swati because she saw that she was on the outs and she needed another target. And it was easier to convince them to vote out Swati than it was to convince them to vote out someone else. Because like she kind of pitched the idea of like, oh, let's vote out Roxroy, and it didn't seem like anyone was biting that, so she switched to Swati. And so I feel like it's not like Tori turned on her number one because she like wanted to. It was because she read the room and realized that was what she had to do if she wanted to stay in the game.
Good perceptions, I think. Like realizing Tori and Zach, hey, we're on the bottom in episode 1. Tori's like, nah, Zach, you're going home. Kick him under the bus. This episode, oh, me and Swati are on the bottom. Kick Swati under the bus so I can move up on the ladder ranks. So I think it's an interesting strategy because it's so ruthless and so scrappy, like playing from the bottom like that, and then always throwing another person in front of you so you can make it one more day. It's interesting.
But they never really portray Tori as like mean, which I think is interesting because like it would be very easy to like kind of portray her as like a mean girl or like a bitch for doing this, but like she's never portrayed that way. So I think that's like good for her chances of getting further because they could have made her into a villain, but they didn't.
And I think Tori did really well at Tribal Council. She was very calm. She had that therapist voice going on, like just sort of bringing down the situation. Whereas I felt like in Tribal Council, Swati seemed to get more riled up and maybe started to like get nervous or anxious at Tribal. Whereas Tori was
very defensive.
Yeah, Tori was so calm the entire time. And I feel like it's got to be so hard for Swati being so young. And then we hear Roxbury say, I'm proud of her. She's shy. She's coming out of her shell. And then Tori is just saying like, no, I never said that. I never did that. for Swati, how do you combat an argument where someone is like, no, you did this, like, I never said that. You can't combat that kind of argument.
Yeah, you kind of have to be the first person to like get your side of the story out. Because, like, of course, you're going to say, like, oh, I didn't say that, because, like, you would say that regardless of whether or not you actually said the thing that they were claiming you said. So you either have to present, like, a compelling narrative that shows, like, all of the reasons why Tori would be lying, or just, like, make up an excuse for it.
Yeah, which is hard, especially because there is truth to like what Tori is saying. There's truth to what Swati is saying. Like they both flipped on Drea. Like we saw them talking a few episodes ago after Drea told them about the extra vote. They were like, oh, we don't want to do the girls thing. Like maybe let's vote Drea out. So it's like there's truths from both of their sides saying that the other wanted to flip on Drea because we saw both of them maybe wanting to flip on her. So it's hard to combat an argument where there are truths because it's like you can't deny it because it's partially true at least.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Swati is she had to do more than just prove that Tori was wrong. She also had to offer a reason why she was like telling everyone like, "Oh, you're my number one, you're my number one," and I feel like that's eventually what brought her down.
Yeah, we see Swati play the shot in the dark. Like we've said previously, so many shot in the darks being played this season. People this season, maybe not good at keeping other people's nerves down. They haven't been able to do a blindside yet. Everyone else has been spooked into playing their shot in the dark. So, compared to last season, where everyone felt comfortable, everyone didn't think that they were the one to go home, so they never played the shot in the dark. Here, everyone is playing the shot in the dark, and I think that's interesting to like juxtapose against last season.
I'm not sure if last season it was because everyone felt comfortable. I think part of it is you have to weigh like the risk of losing your vote against the risk of like going home. And I think for some of them, like they thought that they had people on their side, and so they needed to keep their vote. And so I think maybe that kind of goes along with them being more comfortable, but like I think that a lot of people do kind of assume that it's going to be a unanimous vote if it is a shot in the dark situation. So, yeah.
Yeah, and by more comfortable, it's not like, oh, I 100% think I'm safe, but like for Green Team last season, oh, we're blindsiding Brad, we're blindsiding Jeannie. They're not playing their shot in the dark because everyone thinks they're good with everyone else. They think they're closer to the people in power than they really are, and so they feel, quote, comfortable that they aren't going to be flipped on that episode, so they're not playing the shot in the dark. So more like that, like the false senses of reality were making them more comfortable, whereas it seems like this season they're not good at making up those false realities, like, hey, be calm, you're my number one, don't play your shot in the dark, but not saying that, but just like, the vibes, like we saw at Tribal. You want people to vibe with you and you don't want them to get sketched out by you, and it feels like this season people aren't giving and getting those vibes to make them feel comfortable enough to not play the shot in the dark.
It could just be that they're more paranoid.
Yeah, which we see Roxroyd left out of the vote. Not good here. I wonder why he was left out. Did they think that he wasn't going to flip and vote Swati out and keep Tori in the game? Roxroy seemed to want Tori to go really badly. So it's interesting. That could be not good for his game moving forward. Also interesting, Romeo's name hasn't really been brought up on this tribe as someone to be voted out. We've seen Drea's name brought up, Tori's name brought up, Roxroy's name brought up, but we've never really seen in the edit Romeo's name being brought up as someone to vote out.
I feel like with the Roxroy thing, it's like Tori said, Roxroy doesn't like any idea unless he's the one who came up with it. So maybe they just like let him vote on his own, knowing it won't change the results. Because it's not worth like wrangling him and then maybe having him spill the beans to someone. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that we haven't seen Romeo's name brought up. I guess it's one of those things where like Romeo is playing well in the sense that like he is voting correctly, but he's not playing well in the sense that he is like unilaterally controlling the game on his tribe.
And I guess he's liked enough that people want to work with him and they're not wanting to vote him out versus like, even though Drea is sort of controlling things, people maybe like her less that they want to vote her out versus, oh, we like Romeo more, let's not even bring his name up as a consideration for voting or a backup or anything. But I think that's interesting. I feel like if Blue goes to tribal again, Roxroy or Tori are the ones to go. Maybe Tori finds the idol finally, and so maybe it'll be Roxroy.
Yeah. Also, I'm kind of hoping that Blue doesn't go to tribal again, just because, or I don't know. I don't want any of the tribes to go to tribal. But yeah, I do think Roxroy is potentially one, just because like maybe Romeo wants to like begin to cultivate his relationship with Tori more. We'd have to see. I just feel like it's one of those things where like we still know that Tori is gonna find that advantage. So like maybe if Romeo starts working with her because Romeo wants like in on that advantage. So we'll have to see. Because I feel like if one of your allies funds the Beware advantage, that's actually a really good thing for you because you never lose your vote, you never have any risk, but like you can also make your ally feel bad for not playing the advantage on you. So it's one of those things where like you could potentially get an advantage played on you that you never had to have any of the negative sides for.
Yeah, especially with the new rules this season saying that the idols become activated come merge without any consequences. If the phrases are never said, if they're never activated, they automatically become activated. It's like you want the idol from your team. Like we saw Daniel say last week, you're not going to vote Mike out. Maybe you find it again, maybe not, but like you want the idol going into merge with your original tribe. Even if maybe you're not too close, you at least know where the idol is versus your cluster going into the merge, not having that advantage, not having that idol, not knowing where it is. It's better to like, sleep with the devil than the one that you don't. Like you want the idol, you want to know where it is, and you want one going into the merge with your original team.
Yeah. So I guess we'll have to see how that shakes out. I'm really interested to see when Blue finds their idol because they're kind of running out of time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. Wednesdays are always so much fun. Let us know in the comments your thoughts. Did you like this episode? Did you not? Are you a fan of the editing of this season? I feel like we talked a lot about that at the start of this podcast. I guess, yeah. Are you surprised about this tribal council? Did you want Swati to go? Did you want Tori to go? Or were you spoiled like us? So sad. Ruined all of the tension.
Yeah, so let us know all of that down in the comments below, and we will see you guys